Hey guys, so thank you for joining us on this journey to try to figure out and unravel this mystery around the death of Son Jung Min, a 21-year-old medical student who mysteriously vanished for 5 days in the Han River and then ended up dead. And now we're trying to piece together the events of the night that he went missing to see how he died and who's responsible. So if you're new to this topic and you want to get all up to speed on it, I recommend checking out the first video. And after that, I have the latest updates for you on what we know now. So from the last video, we were able to piece together what happened based on CCTV footage of the park, CCTV footage of the convenience store to see where these two guys, these two friends who went to the Banpo River Park at the Han River to go drink and hang out, were doing and where they were at what time. And then also we added to that the testimony of Mr. A, the friend that was with SJM who died. His testimony of what he said happened. So we were able to piece together the truth from the video evidence and then also put on top of that the account that he claimed happened. So then what we were able to do was to get a compressed time frame of what definitely happened, where we saw that we definitely knew that the two were still alive at 1:50 a.m. when the Instagram post of them dancing was put up on SJM's Instagram page. And then 4:30 a.m. we saw Mr. A walk out of the park. We knew that he was alone, so we had that time frame. Then we had the account of Mr. A saying that from 3:30 to 4:30 they were sleeping, but until 3:30 he was definitely with him and alive. But we had no way to confirm that. So now we have some eyewitness accounts, some additional photos that has compressed the timeline now to 42 missing minutes. So let's go over this. So we've had about 7 eyewitnesses come forward, and they were around the park. And surprisingly, I had no idea. People stay out really late, and they are just sitting around like it's the middle of the afternoon, just drinking in the park. Even it's like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. They're just sitting there. I don't know. But anyways, that's how we have all these eyewitnesses, if you're wondering. People are out running and jogging at like 4:30 in the morning too. So that's how we have all these eyewitness accounts. So at 2:18 a.m., we have this picture that we saw posted, or that we got from one of the eyewitnesses. And I'm calling it the 2:18 a.m. keeled over picture. And it's somebody who's sitting next to the two at the park on the grass. And, you know, it's kind of like you're taking pictures of somebody like you're not supposed to, but you do. And in Korea, like, you're really not supposed to do that because there's tougher laws against that. In America, like, if you're in a public space, I guess you're allowed to take pictures pretty much if you want to. But in Korea, if you don't have their consent, there's a lot of legal ramifications around that. But the reason why this guy felt very compelled, or this person felt very compelled to take a picture of the two, was that Mr. A was just kind of crouched and he looked fine. And then SJM looked like passed out. But if you look at the picture, it's a little bit different than being passed out drunk. He looks like he's almost dead or in a coma. And so the witness said that it didn't look right. And then on top of that, Mr. A was kind of going through SJM's pockets and like putting stuff in his bag. And then he was just like kind of, I guess, like clearing the space, getting ready to leave, but just staying there. And then continuing on. And then he said that, like, you know, like, since SJM was laying on the ground, then he would lay on the ground too, but then like really close, like he said like in a cringe-worthy way. So I guess maybe it looked a little bit like homoerotic or something. I don't know, but something about it just didn't look like it was right. And especially when that guy looks like really lifeless. And Here in Korea, we're very accommodating towards being drunk, public drunkenness, because it's such a society where you can suffer a lot of power imbalances. So people are very understanding that if you have to go out and drink because there's no other way to kind of like let go of your problems, I think everybody's sort of like they understand it. And so it's a surprising how accommodating people are, like how understanding people are, how willing they're to let go of people just being drunk and stupid. So what I'm trying to say is that seeing people drunk out on the street, even like people like middle-aged fathers just drunk, just like laying on the concrete, like nobody's like, oh my god, was they just, it's normal. And I think there's like kind of a, you can kind of tell the difference between somebody who's like passed out drunk, even if they've drank a lot. I think there's something different about their breathing, even in a picture, than somebody who looks like they're in a coma or like they're almost dead. So I think that's why this picture sort of creeps me out, and I think it's creeped a lot of people out. And then I think that's what really creeped out the guy who actually took it, or girl. I don't know if it's a guy or girl. So that's a keeled out picture from 2:18 a.m. Now, mind you, like during this time, 2 a.m. to 3:30 a.m., Mr. A claims that there was a mixture of just sleeping and running around or like doing things, between the two guys. And so from other witnesses said that, well, they saw like Mr. A go back and forth throwing up from where they were sitting and to the river, which wasn't that far away, to the embankment. Now, the embankment, though, has a very sharp decline. There's an embankment, and then there's rocks, and then there's the water. The water is very shallow, though, so it's not like if you fall over, you're gonna fall into a pool. It's almost like a kiddie pool. There was an eyewitness that said that at until 3:38 a.m., they definitely saw the two sitting on the grass. So that's where we have the last timestamp from an eyewitness, 3:38 a.m. So now we're able to move the timeline from 1:50 a.m. to 3:38 a.m. Then the next timestamp is 4:20 a.m. is when another eyewitness found Mr. A by himself on that embankment I talked about, laying there sleeping by himself. And so that guy that, and this was a man, I think, that found him was like, oh, this is kind of dangerous. He shouldn't, be sleeping there. So he shook him, woke him up and said, hey, this is not a safe place for you to sleep. You should wake up. And so that's when he woke up and left, and then that's when we saw him 10 minutes later be captured by the security cameras leaving the park. So we moved up the timeline from 4:30 to 4:20 from this eyewitness account from the man saying that's when he woke him up. So now we really don't know what happened between 3:38 a.m. from when the two guys were on the grass to 4:20 a.m. when Mr. A was alone sleeping on the embankment. So now there's like a lot of the debate of how did SJM get to the water? And in what condition did he get to the water? Was he dead before he got to the water, or did he die in the water? So what we do know from the autopsy, this is the second new information besides the timeline, is that the autopsy showed that he drowned in the water, so that he was still alive when he went into the water. You don't know what state he was in. Maybe he was in a coma or, passed out, but he was still alive because, this is how they tested it, I didn't know. If they find significant amounts of plankton in your, lungs, or in your body, that means that you've breathed in water, and then you drowned, and therefore you were alive. If you don't have significant amounts of plankton, then that means you weren't breathing. So they did say that he was alive. They did do a blood alcohol concentration test, but they only gave the results to the family, and they didn't release it. But I've also heard that BAC tests after a corpse has been fermenting for a while is not accurate because a lot of things in your body start turning into alcohol, so it's not a accurate test. And besides, it's all pretty much already established that they were drinking a lot and that they were pretty much drunk and impaired in some format or another. And they said they did a drug test. I don't know what kind of drug test or how comprehensive it was, but they said that the results weren't significant, that there was nothing really there. And so because in the last video, I didn't want to say, but I kind of had a suspicion that maybe it might be drugs, because it just didn't add up. And I'll go into that maybe a little bit more, because I'm leaning more towards something is not adding up, and there's got to be something else to this, and perhaps it may be some other element that is not just alcohol or an accident. But if you are of the mind where, it could just be alcohol, we did get a clarification on how much alcohol there was involved and how it was consumed. It was purchased and consumed apparently in 3 rounds. So they went to the store about 3 times. There was a total of 9 bottles. They had 4 bottles of soju, but they did not have the small 350 milliliter bottles. They had the big, plastic bottles that were like 465 milliliters. 4 of those. 2 bottles of Cheongju and 3 bottles of makgeolli. So that's a lot of alcohol. And Mr. A claims that they drank all of it. Now, unless Mr. A has like the tolerance of like a Superman, which he could, remember when you were young, there was always that one person that could just like drink and drink and drink. But he looked fine-ish. And so at least when in that 218 picture, and it's just a picture, you don't know if somebody's like going like on their cell phone and they're like really like about to fall over, but he did look much better than the guy who was looking comatose. Okay, so here are some of the other factual updates. No witnesses testified to the 2 arguing, so there were no witnesses that said that they were fighting, so that sort of minimizes the chances that this could have been like a killing because of fighting. SMJ's father released a photo and a statement saying that his son was really scared of water, would never go towards the water, would not be something that he would volunteer to do. Okay, so those are the facts that we have added until now. So let's now move on to some of the surmising that some of the analysts or commentators on more of the mainstream media are making. So there's something that that's about this case that remains on top of mind, because there's something that doesn't sit right with a lot of people. And I think it's because there is something that is jarring us, because we might think that there's like this heinous deception that's going on right in front of our eyes. And that is very disturbing, because in a way, if this was foul play, of course, that individual action is an individual choice, but the mechanisms that allowed it to get to that point, and then also if it gets covered up, the mechanisms that allow the cover up, is essentially what we allowed as a society. And so in some way, we all have a collective responsibility. And I feel like that's what everybody is feeling right now, because I've never seen so many people have this like vested interest in such a case, unless it is like one of these hot button society issues like the Seoul Ferry case, like the impeachment of the president Park. There are cases where and then also that case about the abuse of the adopted child. There's these cases where it feels like, these are new lines that we are drawing as a society that should not be crossed, and we have to take a stand. So I feel like this is what we're trying to take a stand on, is like no more cover-ups, because this is becoming a statement more towards like, if this is a case where Mr. A and his family are influential and are covering things up and having influence within the system to protect this son, that's something that we're no longer willing to accept. I think that is more and more where the sentiment is going, and people don't want to accuse Mr. A of being a criminal if he's not a criminal, but they definitely do not want him to get away with it if he is. The TV guests on the news who are analyzing this are looking at Mr. A little bit more suspiciously because Mr. A is adding more and more to his story as more and more evidence that forces him to answer questions come out. So for example, the call to his parents at 3:30 a.m., he never volunteered until the records of that phone call came up. And then he said, "Oh yeah, I guess I made that call." When he was found sleeping on the embankment and not on the lawn by that witness who woke him up, then he said, "Oh yeah, that's what happened." So there are a lot of these details that are beginning to emerge only after he's been forced to confront them. So people are becoming a little bit more suspicious, and let us not forget about the shoes. The shoes are now becoming an even bigger issue than before. Before, in the last video, I said, like, yeah, the father was just wondering, like, maybe the shoes can kind of give a sense of, like, where they were to try to locate, how or where, the course of events happened in terms of the timeline. But now the shoes really establish whether Mr. A went all the way to the water and potentially dumped SMJ in or not, and whether there was other types of DNA on it. So the more clarified statement from the family of Mr. A said that, oh, he had thrown up on his shoes, it was nasty, we threw them away. But so many people in the Korean public, at least, are like, yeah, as much as, we could kind of understand that maybe if, they said that the shoes were worn out, and it was, there was throw up, then they threw it away, but it wasn't another kid's throw up, it was his own kid's throw up, and, these shoes these days are kind of expensive, so, most people would wash them or whatnot. But even then, they were kind of like, they were putting the caveat of, like, they can't assume that everybody would do that, but most of them said that that is kind of a weird thing to do, that most people would not throw away their shoes. And it looked very convenient that immediately they said, no, we threw away the shoes. And that was like a critical piece of evidence. Well, the thing is that also, like, I didn't think it was that suspicious at the time, but now it seems a little bit more suspicious because it seems like they knew that would be a critical link to link his son to the site of the last place of the disappearance. Now, there's been so many zoomed up footages now and analysis of, like, the CCTV of the shoes and what condition the shoes were in when Mr. A went to the park and when Mr. A left the park. So when you look at Mr. A's shoes when he went into the park and went into the convenience store, people are saying that they seemed to fit well, they were clean, they were really, comfortable looking on his feet. When he left, when he was shuffling out, the shoelaces looked like wet and they were flopping. The shoes looked like they had, like, kind of expanded out, and it looked like in the back he had either folded them down or they were, like, so big and loose and floppy, so either that they had gotten all wet, or some people are saying that maybe he even, like, ditched his shoes and took SJM shoes and switched the shoes. Okay, yeah, let's go through the netizen theory. So netizens claim that Mr. A was using SJM's phone to delete his images off of SJM's Instagram on SJM's phone, which, remember, they switched, he had SJM's phone, they still can't locate Mr. A's phone. So why would you try to delete your presence on somebody's Instagram account just because you got drunk? Even if you got drunk with your friend disappeared, they didn't do anything wrong. Why would you be deleting yourself off of, why would you be deleting yourself off? Next, the netizens claim, now they're like looking through now really grainy, faraway images of CCTV footage. They claim that Mr. A had put SJM over his back, like slung him over his back, and they claim that in the 218 slumped over or 218 keeled over picture that Mr. A had next to him a skateboard, and that he used the skateboard to move him over to a more remote spot after waiting for everybody to leave the park. So remember that critical time period, 3:38 a.m., when then that was like the last person to see the two of them, 3:38 a.m. to 4:20. That was the missing time period. So netizens are claiming that that is when maybe there was a time when nobody was left in the park. That was an opportunity for Mr. A to transport the body somehow. I don't know where suddenly he got a skateboard. It doesn't look like, I don't know where the skateboard came from, because it doesn't look like he was carrying a skateboard into the park. And now there are more claims about Mr. A's parents. They say that Mr. A's parents are sociopaths or like covering up for his kid, and that they're probably somewhat influential, and that they're somewhat influential, and they helped destroy and cover up evidence. Because when you see the CCTV camera of them coming back to the park around 5 a.m., they went to the spot down the embankment where Mr. A had been woken up by the witness at 4:20 a.m. So some people are surmising that Mr. A wasn't able to collect all of his belongings and stuff, and then just hightailed it out, and then he had to go back to make sure he like got everything out and cleared all of the evidence and made sure nothing was there, and maybe that's where he like destroyed his red iPhone and threw it in the water. And so people are saying that his parents helped, and they got some other relative with an umbrella. Oh my god, this is like Dealey Plaza, JFK, the umbrella man. But they had an umbrella person in the Banpo River Park as well, maybe to hide from the CCTV cameras, like to try to grab all the stuff and not be able to be seen, because they said like it wasn't even raining that day. Why would you need an umbrella? So people are really concerned about this case, because if it looks like this really cold-blooded, heartless cover-up of these parents going to the park, destroying the evidence, and then using their connections to manipulate the system so that their son can get off scot-free while they just dump the body of this other kid into the river and send him on down to his death, that is very chilling for Korean society, because thank goodness Korean society wants to move in the direction where they can have a lot more communal trust in our system. They do. And when they look at this kind of a case where there's a potential where the system is being manipulated yet again, I think people want to put their foot down. Okay, so that's what we know at the moment. If there are any more pressing updates, I'll do another video. But until then, stay safe out there.
Tune in next time. Don't forget to subscribe. Find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Love you.